When talking about underdog stories in sports, people are quick to reference Manchester City winning the 2016 Premier League.
5,000 to 1 shot.
And the USA winning gold in ice hockey over USSR in 1980. Or maybe even Stephen Bradbury winning Australia their first ever gold medal in the Winter Olympics.
Oh, and it's a lot of contact. Oh, they've all gone down. Bradbury is going to come through and win gold.
One story that you'll fail to see in any sporting journals or web threads on the subject is the one I'm going to share with you here. But what even is an underdog story? The Oxford Dictionary defines an underdog as a competitor thought to have little chance of winning a fight or contest, and the story as an account of imaginary or real people and events told for entertainment. And the story can be broken down further into 5 elements, being setting, characters, plot, tension, and resolution. So now that we know what defines an underdog story, I think it's time to get started with this one. It's said in auto racing circles that your biggest rival aren't your fellow competitors, but in fact the racing track itself. Le Mans, Spa, Daytona, and the Finnish Rally all have something in common. They do not reward mistakes.
This is a massive crash, and this is Alan McNeish and the Audi 3. Look at that, wow. It's absolutely...
The same can be said for the setting of this story, Mount Panorama, Bathurst.
That was Bargwanna. Had a huge moment. It's rolled. Oh, bad rejoin and another huge incident.
No! There's a massive accident on top of the mountain.
But how did this joint become Australia's mecca for touring car racing and arguably hold the biggest touring car race in the world? Race fans the whole world over would have Mayor Martin Griffiths to thank for this awesome racetrack. In the mid-1930s, he pitched a project to the local government at the time titled as a tourist drive around the mountain to attract tourists to the local area. The higher government liked the idea and approved for funds for the road to be built. Little did they know is the absolute mad lad Martin had full intentions of having race events held on the road as soon as it was paved. The ribbon of tarmac was completed in March of 1938 and less than a month later held its first ever race, the Australian Tourist Trophy. In modern times when a new track gets constructed, safety is the number one priority. They are built in such a manner that they are as flat as possible with plenty of paved runoff area. Many race fans and critics alike criticise this, saying that it takes character away from the circuit and makes it boring. The same cannot be said about Bathurst. The word safety pretty much didn't exist when it was constructed. It has 20 turns and 174 metres of elevation change. The elevation change is so large that the gradient is as steep as 1 in 6 in some spots of the track. The altitude changes, coupled with not only lack of runoff, but a complete lack of safety guardrails in the early days, means we have a very unique circuit that will probably never be duplicated ever again because of the tight safety regulations modern racetracks have to confine to. As well as lack of runoff and altitude changes, the track is 6.1 kilometres long, which means it could be bone dry on one end of the circuit and pouring down rain on the other, which makes it absolutely impossible to pick the correct strategy, either wet or dry weather tyres. It's a gamble that pays off for some, but doesn't for most.
Oh no! Oh no!
But weather isn't the only environmental factor to worry about. Animals play their part in the role too. Echidnas and also kangaroos that become a far bigger part of the action than they ever bargained for.
Get up pretty quickly. Oh, look at this, a replay at the top of the mountain. Jonathan Bykoff. Oh, that is so scary. Somehow...
The race is also 1,000 kilometres long, which is the equivalent of driving this far in Europe or this far in America. Which means there's plenty of time for one or more of these factors to play a role throughout the event. For these reasons, the race quickly turned into a crowd favourite. People turned up in droves to the annual spectacle, and the big car manufacturers took notice. Ford, Holden, which is Australia's division of General Motors, and Chrysler quickly learnt that success on the racetrack on Sunday turned into improved sales come Monday, and just like in America the saying, race on Sunday, sell on Monday, was born. It became a real tit-for-tat battle between manufacturers. Ford would release a car to win, then General Motors Holden would release a better car to beat them, then Ford would fight back with neither better car again, while Chrysler was just trying their best to keep up. Chrysler Australia's racing division didn't have as much factory support in the way of funds that Ford and Holden gave their respective racing divisions at the time, but despite this, they put up a very valiant effort and kept Ford and Holden very honest. Chrysler were absolutely killing it in the US at the time anyway, with the likes of Richard Petty and his Blue Plymouth Surbird, so they had that at least. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end with the built for Bathurst cars that were killed out during the great 1972 supercar scare. The details of the story are too large to get into here, but pretty much the Sydney-based newspaper, the Sun Herald, released a scathing front-page article titled 160-mile-an-hour supercars soon, and listed details on how limited-run special cars were being built specifically for Bathurst and then being sold to the public so they can meet the homologation requirements to be entered into the race. The racing regulation at the time stated that 200 cars had to be produced and then sold to the public in order for the model to be allowed to enter the race. The media argued how it's very dangerous for the public to be offered extremely high performance cars just to meet this requirement. As a result of the bad press, many plans for future cars were abandoned and factory support for race teams was highly reduced in the years following. Most notably was the backing of Ford teams, and Chrysler pulled their support out altogether. This was a real shame because the projects in the work at the time included the V8 powered Holden XU2 Tirana and the Ford Falcon GTHO Phase 4. These cars would sadly never see a racetrack or a road. Ford and Holden would still make cars that could tackle Bathurst, but their support would be greatly reduced due to the negative press. Peter Brock would become one of the most beloved and winningest drivers in Bathurst history, so successful that he would one day be given the name King of the Mountain. To be a king in any sport is a massive achievement that is not handed out readily, but in October 1972, when his tale begins, not only was he not known as the King of the Mountain yet, he was hardly known at all. Making his third start at Bathurst for the Holden dealer team that was being run by legendary team owner Harry Firth. Firth was in Australian motorsport what Junior Johnson was to NASCAR or what Enzo Ferrari was to Formula 1. So you were driving for Harry, you were driving for the best. Harry Firth saw a young Brock perform extremely well at local race events in his home-built, highly modified Austin A30, winning pretty much everything he entered it in. Being very impressed by his raw talent, Firth pinned Brock to drive into the second of two Holden dealer team XU1 Tiranas in the Australian Touring Car Championship as well as Bathurst, and then another XU1 Tirana specially prepared for a series known as Rallycross. Rallycross is kind of like if rally racing and speedway stock car racing had a child, and Brock excelled at it. As impressive as all this was, Brock absolutely hates work cut out for him as he went up against Alan Moffat in his factory Ford backing. Moffat had quickly proven to be one of the best drivers at Bathurst by winning the previous two endurance events at the circuit. This coupled with the fact that he'll be piloting a 1971 Ford Falcon GTHO Phase 3, a car held in such high esteem that to buy one today will set you back 7 figures. It had a 5.8 litre Cleveland V8 engine that was almost double the size of the 3.3 litre straight 6 that was powering Brock's XU1 Tirana. But Brock had a little ace up his sleeve. Remember earlier when I said Bathurst can have some crazy weather? 1972 was no exception. This style of rainy, wet conditions suits the smaller, more agile XU1 of Brock's perfectly well, as well as the fact that Brock had his rallycross experience. Brock had arguably the better car and the better preparation for the occasion. With all this being said, when the green flag dropped, Moffat used his pole position to take an early demanding lead, but Brock wasted no time making his way through all the Falcons to be right behind Moffat.
Because French is no mean driver. Through the cutting, second time up the mountain. Still Moffat. And Brock's got him, slipped through on the run down to Forest Elbow. Moore's looking for a way past too. The Falcon's definitely slower across the top where it's treacherously slippery. Moffat will pull out the stops down the straight. Now let's see who leads past the pits. Yes, it's Moffat again. He might be taking it easy up the top, but on the straight, he's giving the V8 all it's got.
After several laps of the intense Ford Holden Moffat Brock duel, something had to give, and it was Alan Moffat who spun out at the highest point of the circuit in the wet, treacherous conditions.
He's up a bank at Reed Park. That puts Brock and the Holden Tirana into first.
Although his Falcon wasn't damaged in the incident, the time Moffat lost in the spin made it almost impossible for him to catch Peter Brock, and now with his beers compared around the race, Brock could just cruise home to victory, which he did, to claim his very first ever Bathurst triumph. This was truly a David vs Goliath battle between a small, low-powered Tirana and a big, high-powered Falcon. But is it an underdog story? Possibly, but they were both very heavily factory-backed by Ford and Holden. A real underdog story would have to be a privateer, making a ball by themselves. This is where I introduce the second character of this story. A tough bloke by the name of Dick Johnson that resided in the sleepy Brisbane suburb of Daisy Hill in Queensland, 1,000 kilometres north of Bathurst and all of Australia's premier racing events. Johnson had spent much of his recreational time from the mid-60s onwards racing at local racetracks such as Lakeside in his hot-up daily driver cars, ranging from FJ and EH Aldens until he made an upgrade to an XU1 Torana like what Brock drove at Bathurst in the early 70s. At this time, he earned a healthy income from running the local service station that he owned, but he only had the budget to race at local events. But in the mid-70s, he was able to scrape together a few deals and drive a couple of uncompetitive cars at Bathurst, which ranged from poorly repaired XU1 Toranas to an unreliable Alfa Romeo. However, this was all a means to an end when his first real break came when he was tapped to drive the Bright Bird Ford Capri at no financial expense of his own in the 1976 Bathurst race. Paired up with Graham Moore, they compared the car well enough to manage a 10th place finish overall and a 3rd place in their class. For the next 3 years, from 1977 until 1979, the Bright Bird race car was upgraded from a Ford Capri to a much more powerful Ford Falcon, using the XB variant in 1977 and the XC model in 1978 and 1979. But unfortunately, the increase in power didn't transfer to Bathurst success, with 2 DNFs in 3 years, finishing only once in 1978 in 5th place. At the end of 1979, the team closed down operation completely after the team owner, Brian Burt, tragically died. Now without a team, Dick Johnson would go all in, mortgaging his house and using his life savings to start his own race team. Although this sounds crazy to do, there was some method to his madness. In mid-1979, Ford released a new model of Falcon, the XD, and one of the biggest design goals Ford Australia had with the new model was to make it as fuel efficient as possible to meet the new demands of modern motoring as fuel prices started to increase at an alarming rate. The biggest way Ford did this was by making the new model as light as possible while using as much plastic as practical. The sanctioning body made the minimum weight that the Falcon had to adhere to being just 1,250 kilos. And as per the rulebook, this was all 100% legal. Johnson saw what Ford were doing with the new model. He purchased the next police car XD Falcon and bought the already race-ready and race-reliable running gear and drivelines out of the old closed-down team at Brian Burt Racing that were legal to use in a new model of car. Armed with this new machine and very limited testing, Johnson made the long trip down to Bathurst to tackle the 1980 event. So what's Peter Brock been up to in the time since we spoke to me last? Oh, not too much, other than going on an absolute tear, winning half the Bathursts that had been held in that time period. 1972, 75, 78, and 79. He was also heading into the 1980 event, trying to be the first person ever to win 3 Bathursts in a row, a feat that only has ever happened one other time in the history of the event. It has to be mentioned at this point too, that Peter Brock and his teammate John Harvey were the only 2 drivers in the field receiving any serious factory backing. As mentioned earlier, during the supercar scare, lots of manufacturers got scared off the Bathurst event due to the poor publicity that it received. So these 2 cars were the only 2 cars in the entire field receiving any factory backing. There'd be no fiercer competitor that Johnson would have to beat than Peter Brock and the might of his Holden dealer team. On the Saturday, before the big race on Sunday, the top 10 qualifying cars are selected for a top 10 shootout known as Hardy's Heroes to qualify the top 10 spots on the grid for the Sunday race. The 1974 Bathurst winner Kevin Bartlett in his Chevrolet Camaro, which was owned and funded by millionaire media mogul Kerry Packer, did extremely well to snag the pole position the next day's race. But a big question mark still laid over its drum rear brakes. As per the rules at the time stated that the car had to run the braking system it left the factory with, and the Australian release of the Camaros only had drum brakes on the rear. Johnson qualified alongside him on the front row.
A real battler, if I could use that term in the most affectionate sense, who has got up here by sheer skill and determination on the front row of the grid.
But he had no time to savour in his awesome achievement because the factory-backed Holdens of Brock and John Harvey qualified right behind him on 3rd and 4th spots respectively. On the 5th of October 1980, the 21st Annual Classic was a go.
Johnson who's got the start, and it's a slow start by Kevin Bartlett in the Camaro, and the cars are peeling around.
Johnson got the jump to take a very demanding lead over Kevin Bartlett and Peter Brock. What's pretty incredible to think about is that not only Dick Johnson had never won a Bathurst 1000 before, he's never won a national level touring car race before, and that Blue Falcon that is currently leading the biggest race in Australia, just a couple of short months ago, was a Queensland Highway Patrol car on active duty.
Three cars going up there, just in front of Johnny Harvey. Then it's Alan Grice next, who made a good start and is perfectly positioned. But it's Dick Johnson from Queensland, who for the first time draws the cheers of the crowd, and the Ford flags are out as they come flying up the top of the mountain on lap 1 of the Hardy Ferrari 1000 for 1980.
Wait for the cheers from the crowd as they come across the top of the mountain on lap 1. That great shot of the cutting. Look at the wheels hiking as they come down through this part of the course. To the left-hander, brings them back on for the completion of the 3rd lap. That blue Ford is running very strongly indeed. Kevin Bartlett, who missed the start, has now made it up. He's to 2nd place. Peter Brock is 3rd. Alan Grice is 4th. Bobby Morris is 5th. And John Harvey is 6th.
After just 3 laps, it was extremely evident that Dick Johnson was seeing an absolutely blistering pace that Kevin Bartlett and Peter Brock could hardly keep up with.
Dick Johnson lifting his wheels up in rather a dramatic fashion, is leading the race, and it's Kevin Bartlett after him, having got ahead of Peter Brock, who now is running in 3rd place.
Yes, Peter Brock running in 3rd. The race leader, Dick Johnson, going through Forest Elbow. Very wide, almost tail on the concrete wall. Peter Brock, though, is not the...
So fast was Johnson's pace that Kevin Bartlett, trying to keep up, burnt out the questionable drum rear brakes on his Chevy Camaro, forcing him to make an unsettled stop to replace them, costing him any chance of the race. Leaving Brock in 2nd place to pursue Johnson, who now had a substantial lead. Brock racing as hard as he could in a strong effort to try and keep up with Johnson's pace, hit a small lapped car of Gary Rowe, causing Rowe's Holden Gemini to roll into its roof. Brock was forced into the pits for repair, which was very chaotic due to Peter Brock not being able to warn his team that he was coming in for an unscheduled stop on account of radio communication issues. The damage was only cosmetic, and the steam was due to the fact that the engine was idling as the crew attended to repairs. There was no major mechanical issues, and Peter Brock would soon be back on the track to continue the race. Johnson swooped around him to put him the lap down.
Another car.
And besides that, at that same time, Dick Johnson has now put a lap on Peter Brock. There's Johnson, who overlapped that bunch, which included Peter Brock.
At this point in the race, car 17, on lap 17, had a full lap lead over his biggest rival in the race and was half a lap ahead of 2nd place Bob Morris. But unfortunately, on the 5th of October 1980, this underdog story was not meant to be.
Johnson, who overlapped that bunch, which included Peter Brock.
Well, Brock in the race by 6 laps last year, but I imagine now he's not saying, well, I've got 6 laps to spare. He'd be a very worried man. Mr. Cool of motor racing, but things aren't going well his way, and of course we have Kevin Bartlett with even earlier troubles with his...
Oh, we've had another bang, and is that the race?
That's the leader. Dick Johnson. Now, whether Dick has been hampered by the rescue truck here, which is out on the track, but he has...
When cresting the rise, coming out of the sharp left-hander, nose to cutting, it was thought that Dick Johnson was blindsided by the flatbed truck that was on the circuit recovering another car. But as time went on, it was revealed that the truth was far more heartbreaking and cruel.
It's a sad, sad story, the Dick Johnson story in today's Hardy Ferrari 1000. Leading the race, he got on the top of the hill, and then an animal among the spectators decided to throw a rock at him. Johnson hit it, crashed, and was out of the race.
And there is the rock. You can see it there. It is unbelievable that anyone in the crowd could throw a rock on the track.
What has to be remembered here was that when his Ford smashed into the wall, Johnson not only wrecked his race car and any chance of winning the race, but also burnt up his life savings and his house which he mortgaged to fund his dream, a dream which was now killed, all because by somehow or some way a large rock found its way onto the track. As the race went on, the story of the rock took on a life all of its own and became in such high demand that interviews with Johnson were prioritised over the broadcast of the actual race itself. The story really struck a chord with the fans watching at home.
Dick Johnson, Dick, just if I can interrupt, it's Mike Raymond in the commentary panel. Dick, the switchboards at all the 7 stations across Australia are jammed of people who are so upset about what has happened. And they, believe it or not, ringing and just genuinely pledging money to help you.
So much support was generously thrown behind Johnson by the public that Channel 7 had to set up a specific appeal fund to deal with the tremendous demand. As the race went on, the drama around Johnson became bigger than the actual race itself. Even Brock, who just finished an epic stint to take the lead after his previous incident and was a lap down, handed his car to his co-driver and was visually upset during an interview when he was involved in what happened to Johnson.
Did you know what happened to Dick Johnson?
Well, he hit the retaining wall on the exit of the...
What happened, Peter? Somebody threw a rock out in front of him and he hit the rock and crashed.
Oh, I thought it might have been a small car. That's terrible. That's terrible.
It really is. Well, it's unbelievable that some spectators would do that. It's a sad commentary on it. Well, take a good rest, Peter. Good luck.
There was so much hype around the drama that even Edsel Ford II, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, decided to donate funds to the cause, which was a big deal because ever since the supercar scare mentioned earlier, Ford Australia had given very little support to racing teams.
And we've also had a call from Edsel Ford. And Edsel Ford has agreed to match on behalf of the Ford Motor Company, dollar for dollar, any money donated by viewers of Channel 7 to the Dick Johnson racing team. I think that is a magnificent effort on the part of Edsel Ford on behalf of the Ford Motor Company.
As the race charged on, more dramas, problems and issues that come with Bathurst arose.
This car there with Bill O'Brien in it, stopped on the track suffering, but you can see there just how hot that V6 Capri is. Coming together between one of the biggest cars in the race, the Chev Camaro of Kevin Bartlett, and one of the smallest cars in the race.
At the completion of the race, which took 6 hours, 47 minutes and 52 seconds to complete, it was Peter Brock that was victorious. It was an absolutely brilliant drive to come back from the lap down to win and break 2 records in the process. The first driver to win 3 Bathursts in a row, and the first driver to win 5 races at Bathurst in total. Even though this was a massive feat, it was somewhat overshadowed with what happened to Dick Johnson and the Acura that followed. In true Aussie fashion, the Australian public got behind the battler and donated money. The amount of funds raised was more than enough for Johnson to rebuild his Falcon and tackle Bathurst again, which he strongly felt the need to do to repay the debt to all the awesome people out there that gave the money for him to get back on his feet. And he did. Johnson started the rebuild of his XD Falcon. Starting with the bare shell supplied by Ford Australia, Johnson, with the help of his mates in the garage underneath his Daisy Hill home, started to build what they would hope would be a Bathurst winner. Roll cage, suspension, electrics, bodywork, and engine was all done here. The efforts of his work were highlighted by 60 Minutes at the time, as well as highlighting the sheer amount of support the public gave.
Where did the letters come from?
Look, they came from all over Australia, all sorts of people, little children, pensioners, families, people who aren't even interested in motor racing.
With the car rebuilt and in better shape than ever, Johnson headed to Bathurst with the hope and expectations of the entire country laying on his shoulders. During practice and qualifying, it was very obvious the quick cars to beat would be very similar to the year before, that being the Commodore of Brock and the Camaro of Bartlett. The biggest difference being that the rules were changed to allow the brakes on the Camaro to be upgraded from a drum brake setup to a far better disc style setup, which Kevin Bartlett put to good use to get pole during a torrentially wet qualifying session. Johnson qualified behind him in second, and Brock got third to make the top 3 staying spots the same as the year prior.
Everybody that was out there, and I watched them all on the box, they were all having a go. And sorry to do it to you again this year, Dick. I really thought that you might have got it.
There's going to be no rocks this year though, KB.
Following the drop of the Australian flag to start the race, it was one of the most exciting displays in Australian endurance racing history, with the big bangers of Bartlett, Brock and Johnson swapping the lead many times in the opening laps.
We have touch-off for the 81 Hardy 1000. Johnson and it's Dick Johnson of Queensland, who leads from Kevin Bartlett going into the first turn, and just look at that wall of cars.
A minute 18 seconds to the top of the mountain, the cross skyline for Dick Johnson.
Dick Johnson is the race leader. In second place, pole sitter Kevin Bartlett, and Peter Brock is third. Now down through the tricky, the torturous part of the racetrack. The Camaro has the legs, and this year it can stop. And that was the difference. Last year it had the legs, But Kev had cardiac arrest every time they got to the end of the straight. Here's Johnson. Now the brake duel. Whoa! Not much between them. There was almost a touch.
Johnson's over the strip on the inside.
Boy, Dick Johnson wants to lead this in a hurry, and Brock says, let's make it 3 wide and have a real race of it.
Brock takes the inside run.
Oh.
Johnson's lost out in this battle. Bartlett maintains the lead. Brock is through to second.
Okay, Brock is now going to put the pressure on. I think Brock wants to get up there in front and run. Johnson says, hey, I was up there a minute ago. He's going back after it. The comparison of speed along going up the mountain straight between the Ford and the Commodore. Here's Johnson again. Now it's Peter Brock who takes him on the inside. And whether or not Johnson's going to be happy after taking a lick there for the lead. Up over the top of the mountain. Kevin Bartlett in the Camaro. And right on his tail is Peter Brock. Going to put plenty of pressure on Bartlett and see if that thing can stop. And here he is pulling out. And now going to race Kevin down and just takes him very quickly. That was what Johnson tried to do, but got a fender caught in there at the same time. So, okay, a few laps down, and you listen to the crowd are up because it's Brocky coming from behind in the Commodore that takes Kevin Bartlett. The crowd goes wild along pit straight. Bartlett still in second. Johnson is third. Bob Morris is fourth. Gary Rogers fifth, and sixth place is held by John Harvey.
The power to... oh, we might lose out on the corner here, I think. The right-hander.
Look at this, folks.
There's a definite touch. Bartlett's lost something.
Dearie me. They're attacking this like it's the Oval. But decides to tuck in and see if he can have a shot going back up the mountain one more time. Okay, oh, dearie me, Brock, I think has got problems, has he? He's pulled to the outside, and Bartlett, Brock is, I think, in trouble.
But after many laps of hard racing, something had to give. It was Peter Brock's rear axle, which some attribute to the contact that he had with Cam Bartlett in the opening laps. This has left 1974 race winner Cam Bartlett and Dick Johnson in the hunt for the lead, with 1976 Bathurst 1000 winner Bob Morris in a close third position. After many more blistering laps, it was evident Johnson's Falcon was handling far better than Kevin Bartlett's Camaro.
Says we've got a clear straight away, and we've got a left-hander up the end. Let's see if we can change the positions. And he does just that, but watch Bartlett try and make this a short turn and work away at the inside.
However, Kevin's efforts would amount to little, as he was taken out by a lapped car. On the bright side, it led to one of the greatest pit lane interviews of all time.
Can you spare us a moment? Very frantic times those early laps. Too hard, or do the car feel okay?
Fine. It's just a complete and utter amateur nincompoop got in the way and turned right, just turned straight across my path and put me straight into the fence, and I took him, mate. That guy has to be black flag. I'm going to punch him in the mouth when the race is over, and that's a fact.
At this point in the race, Johnson's two biggest competitors, that being Peter Brock and his Holden Commodore, and Cam Bartlett and his Chevy Camaro, were completely out of the race. It was only fellow Ford driver and 1976 Bathurst 1000 winner Bob Morris in second place, but Johnson had over half a lap lead on him. On lap 73, Johnson came to pit lane for a scheduled stop to refuel, put new tyres on his Falcon, and to hand over his car to veteran co-driver John French. But the team took extra time to attend a minor oil leak, which cost them valuable time. And at the same time, the second place car of Bob Morris pitted for fuel, tyres, and a co-driver change with no issues, and in result took over first place as Johnson was still in pit lane at the time. It was now up to Dick Johnson's veteran co-driver, John French, to chase down Bob Morris's veteran co-driver, John Fitzpatrick, for the lead of the race.
It shows who's the better man. If he gets past on the straight, it shows who's got the most powerful car.
Okay, there we have it, the leader, John Fitzpatrick, and pulling out to effect passing manoeuvre is John French for Dick Johnson. Pulls down the left-hand side of the circuit. Two Ford V8s, and now we have the race lead change.
John French would use the far superior pace of Dickie Johnson's XD Falcon to overtake Bobby Morris's XD Falcon for the lead of the race. But with at least one pit stop left to get to the end of the race, both cars did completely different strategies. The number 7 car of Bobby Morris did a tyre change as well as a co-driver change as a refill at the same time, when the 17 car literally just did gas and goes to do a far quicker stop to get back in the lead. The number 17 car had a nearly entire lap lead over the 7 car when they went back out the race.
Now to Gary Wilkinson, and hopefully he might be able to get a word with John Fitzpatrick.
Frantic activity here in the pits, taking on oil in Bobby Morrison's car. Tyres also being changed. Bobby Morris is in the car. John Fitzpatrick is out. We've got to move slightly. We've got another car coming into the pits behind us. Frantic wheel change. Car 7.
The Morris entry having just lost the lead on the track to the French Johnson Falcon. Bob Morris, of course, now out to try and regain that situation. Tyres are
now with almost an entire lap deficit to try and make up to get the lead of the race, Bob Morris head back on track for some blistering laps. But of course, this being Bathurst, it couldn't be that simple. Morris, pushing extremely hard to catch the leading cars of French and Johnson, was unfortunately involved in a monumental crash that happened in front of him.
At this stage, as you can see, has stopped. Bob Morris, who was running second in the race, is one of the drivers involved. We've had absolute drama here. The track is completely blocked.
When the smoke settled, it revealed a sight that looked more like a post-apocalyptic wasteland than it did a top-tier motor racing circuit. But thankfully, there were no serious injuries. This crash was very unfortunate and destroyed some really nice cars. But on the plus side, the race was 60% completed and would later be declared, which means that all these cars that you see in this incident will be awarded their race fees and prize money, which is pretty good considering that they were all in very strong position at the time, equaling more money, which they could use to rebuild their car and go racing again on another day. In fact, Bob Morris, who was running second at the time, would rebuild an XE Falcon, the next model of Ford after the XD, and win in his first ever race that he entered in. But that was all to be had in the future. In the present, there was a massive cleanup to be had. A cleanup which got interrupted by the clerk of course, who had a very important announcement to make.
And the regulations say that after 60% of the distance has been covered and the red flag is used, the race must be declared. We cannot have a restart.
Well, that means that Dick Johnson is the winner under those conditions?
Yes, he has won.
It's just starting to sink into him that he has won the race. The man who last year lost it after 17 nationals, hit a rock and promoted that spontaneous, incredible reaction by you, the viewing public across Australia, who have enabled Dick Johnson to go motor racing this year. And it's your victory. And they're about to speak to the man.
Although the race finished under circumstances that nobody wanted, you would have been hard-pressed to find anyone that was upset with the results. Using the funds donated from all around Australia to rebuild a race car and win Bathurst in a truly underdog effort, it was absolutely a poetic and beautiful sporting moment.